Welcome back to another episode of In Focus with Haversine Funding, the podcast where we discuss trends, insights, and strategies that drive success within specialty finance. I'm your host, Nolan Reichert. Today we have a very interesting topic. One of the biggest buzzwords that you've heard probably for the past year and a half: AI. How is it being used today in your day-to-day life? Either as a consumer, but more importantly, as a business leader, and how are you incorporating and looking at it? And who better to join us in our opening discussion on this AI subject than Jessie Szemraj from Zen. Zen is a factoring and ABL platform that is helping lenders scale with streamlined processes, workflows. Jessie, thank you so much for joining us. Can you kind of tell our audience a little bit about yourself and then a quick snippet on Zen as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to join you today. So as you said, I'm Jessie Szemraj. I am with the Zen team. Zen is an end-to-end loan management platform. But in my tenure at Zen, we've really been focused on the front end. So origination and underwriting across all types of commercial lending. So I probably have a little bit different of a background than your more typical guest because we're coming from the software and technology side. So I spent about the last decade at various startups, whether that's ad tech, marketing tech, learning tech, HR tech, but really just enjoying solving problems and working with great people. That's actually how I found myself at Zen. Our VPs of operations and engineering, respectively, Alex and Roberto, joined previous to me, but I had actually worked with them at a previous company. And so when they were expanding the team and looking for somebody to join in the product role, I kind of left it the chance. It is a little bit of a full circle moment for me because I actually started my career at American Express in risk management. I had been studying engineering and computer science, and in the first semester of my master's, I realized that I didn't want to be a coder, and all the things I wanted to do were requiring a PhD, which is not the type of person that I am. And so I really thought about what are the skills that I learned from engineering and how could I apply that in another space. And that analytical thinking is what brought me to risk management at American Express. Unfortunately, I quickly learned that I also don't have the personality for a corporate environment. And so that's what had me pivot into more of that startup space. And so really just excited to learn new spaces and help people solve problems with technology.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Just kind of diving right in. How are you seeing commercial lenders today use and incorporate AI outside of just hype or, chat GPT, more on maybe the analytical or more complex side? How are you seeing that?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about the AI and the hype of it all, a lot of it comes down to we're talking about the what more than the why. So LLMs and ChatGPT or Claude and all of the buzzwords. But at the end of the day, AI is really just there to help solve problems. And where I'm seeing a lot of that right now, whether that be in kind of your day to day or more specific in like a higher level lending context, is around efficiency. So AI is really there to help with those efficiency gains, whether that's getting you a head start on an email or a credit memo, or taking some of the manual processes off of your lap. So instead of searching through a ton of bank statements for that one number, you have a system that can elevate that for you. I think it really comes down right now to focusing on how can that AI help with human efficiency.
Yeah, and so you had mentioned some practical applications that you're seeing used, and at Haversine Funding, we're kind of doing the same thing. It's, well, how can we speed up efficiency with the tools that we have? And it's more of like machine learning or assisting. What are some misconceptions that you hear or that about AI, specifically with commercial lending, because it tends to be an older industry to a degree. It seems like the waves of technology continue to come, and you're kind of in the driver's seat of that. And there's a lot of lenders that resist that change. So, what are some misconceptions that you believe kind of get tossed around with AI in our space?
I think one of the big ones, whether it's specific to this space or not, is that AI is here to replace the humans. And while that may be possible in a future state, the way we really think about it is that AI is here to help the humans rather than replace them. And so that means not necessarily handing over all of the decision making, all of the thinking to that AI, but really having it help you do more and have it do better. I think alongside that, there are obviously a lot of kind of the security concerns around not just, staying compliant and making sure that, PII, all of that data is not leaking out into other data sources or other models. Um, Also kind of like the matrix element of, is it going to make the wrong decision? Is it going to hallucinate and tell you the wrong answer? And so I think where we really keep coming back to is like, what is the right level of partnership between technology and humans to make sure that we can ease our way into it? And if we all get comfortable at a certain point as the models develop, they're very different now than they were even 6 months ago. Maybe we get to a future state where we can trust it to make some of like the less important decisions. One of the things in the technology world we always hear about is the difference between a one-way door decision and a two-way door decision. A two-way door decision meaning something that you can actually walk back through and undo that decision. And so starting with those lower risk decisions is a great place.
Yeah, and you had kind of touched on something that I'd wanted to bring up, and so I'm glad you had mentioned it. It's the human element. It is the fear, or maybe not the fear, but the idea that it is going to replace the human. And in our industry, that is probably what gets the most pushback. So how do you see that relationship, or what do you think that relationship between the human and the computer looks like, and how are groups balancing that, where they're still leveraging the tool, but there's enough human oversight for those decisions, or for that machine learning?
Yeah, I think a great way to think about it right now is almost as a junior or entry level employee. When you have those new team members join the team, there's a lot of oversight we're used to doing. You have to train people, you have to make sure that they're following the right processes. We all have our fabulous checklists, and making sure that those steps aren't being skipped along the way. A lot of what I'm hearing in terms of AI prompts and how we get there is it's turning into how do we train the tool to do what we want to do, and then it can become a little bit more autonomous or helpful. So I think keeping it in the lens of that junior or entry level employee can really be a good frame of reference.
The way you kind of phrase that, where it's someone that you would still check their work. They're just making life easier. They have knowledge to do a task, but you still would have oversight. So and the big reason why the discussion around AI having too much control is risk. There's always a worry around risk, and different lenders are using the AI tools drastically different. So when you look at transportation, where you're dealing with tons of invoices, a lot of verification collections, they might have tools where they are using it to vary any differences, or anything that doesn't look the same as the other 20,000 rate cons that they already have in their system that they can kind of compare it against. But when we're focusing on risk, how do you build that model where you are determining what is the right level of risk where we can really make confident decisions?
I think a good place to start in that is to help, again, to help you make that decision. So I think a great example is something as simple as driver's license fraud. We've obviously seen a lot of that in the industry, and actually AI is starting to help the bad guys with creating really realistic looking fake driver's licenses. But you can also use AI like on the good guy side to combat that. Um, and so making sure that we can use the tool to elevate the information, but then still have the human take that next step. So instead of relying on the AI to say, this is a good driver's license, this is a bad driver's license, like you don't need to look at it, don't worry about it. It can be something as, hey, we think something's a little off. The technology is detecting something. and we're going to elevate that for you and flag it for you in a way that you don't have to comb through all of the things. You're not losing efficiency because you have to check every single little I and T, but you can still have that information elevated and flagged for you to then dig in that next step further. It also depends on the area of risk. As you mentioned, something like scanning invoices might be very different from making that underwriting decision up front because you either have like a holistic bad actor or you maybe have like one thing that is off. And so the different thresholds and training around let's be more cautious around things that are higher risk and let's trust it a little bit more with time and practice for the things that are lower risk. So again, going back to that model of would you trust a junior employee to make this decision?
Right. That's great feedback. One of the things as well, that is constant a discussion that you had brought up is data privacy. So are you seeing more increased concern when it comes to keeping that data private, or are you actually seeing it go in the opposite direction where these tools are trying to secure your data? Like, where do you see that going? And it could be both, but just really curious to hear your feedback because you see it more firsthand than a lot of our audience and myself would.
Yeah, I think in all of lending, obviously security has to be top of mind.
Right.
And so you kind of have to approach with that level being the first qualifier. And that's 100% how we start.
Mm-hmm.
From there, what I would say is I don't know if it's so much there's more or less concern, but I definitely think there's more discussion because it's a new technology. And more importantly, with that new technology, in order to train these models, you're giving it data. And then not only is there a concern of that data getting out into the world, but also just getting mixed in with all of the other things an AI tool might be doing. Or if your competitors are using the same tool and you don't want your data or your special sauce leaking into that territory. So security, I think, is always top of mind in this world, but we are definitely talking about it a lot more because there are new things to consider.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. Kind of jumping gears completely. You're with Zen.
Mm-hmm.
So when you had joined the Zen team and you started really kind of building out the product, what were you guys solving for? So what did you see in our current industry that you guys were trying to solve for?
Yeah, one of the first things I observed is everybody has different tools, different process to get from that, initial sales call all the way through to deciding, okay, yes, we're going to move forward with this deal and work with someone. And we're not trying to necessarily change that, but how can we make it better? We see a lot of, I've got an Excel spreadsheet over here and Post-it notes over here and DocuSign over here and what we call, the 15 tabs of tab roulette for your risk and underwriting. So how can Zen come in and help piece all of these pieces together for you in a single pane of glass to just make it that much easier? So the way we approach that is not by trying to say, we will do it all and do it the best, but to actually find and identify best-in-class partners, as we know technology, like that is our bread and butter, so we can help find the best-in-class providers and then bring them together in a single system so that workflow becomes much, much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love talking to people that aren't from or haven't been brought up in our industry because it's so curious to hear their perspective, especially when it comes to the technology side, on ways that you think groups can be more efficient. But keeping track on the AI side, how does AI fit into the Zen experience or the Zen platform? Are you guys utilizing those tools, building them out? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I'd say there's two big buckets I want to touch
Mm-hmm.
on here. So the first is very similar to what I just mentioned. There are a bunch of point solutions being built. We talked about being able to read and scan invoices to avoid manual entry. We've talked about driver's license fraud. We've talked some about kind of getting that head start on financial spreading and analysis when you're underwriting a deal. There's all of these solutions out there, but we're trying to bring them together to make it really easy and kind of conduct that orchestra so that you can operate out of a single platform and take advantage of all of the best technology at the same time. So that's kind of the like lender or our customers and partners facing side of things. The other part that I don't think is being talked about nearly as much is we're also using AI and technology internally to be able to move faster and be much more responsive to feedback. And so I don't think it's always just about like what's the AI tool for you, but what does it actually get us? And in our case, I join a lot of our customer and sales calls. I'm not a salesperson. I'm there to listen. The running joke is I'm a little bit of a software therapist. So tell me your problems so that I can fix them. And what that very much means is if I hear a piece of feedback on, it's always a game of priorities. What's the first thing we're going to do? But now we're actually able to get to those much faster. So instead of things being, I hear it and it's delivered in, say, a month, it's something that we can get to in weeks and honestly, hopefully days very soon.
Wow. What is, since you get the opportunity to work with a lot of people in our industry, what are some like success stories? Do you have any success stories where someone might have been a little bit hesitant about AI, and then how you guys were able to work with them and implement these tools for efficiency? Is there any examples that come to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like one simple concrete one is digging through bank statements, trying to find those MCAs. It's a thing that I've heard a lot about. Our customers tend to get 3 to 6 months of bank statements, and God forbid there be multiple bank accounts with that. And then you have to comb through all of these PDF documents to find that one thing that you care about. And with the AI of it all, we've gotten much better at being able to read these documents and then being able to elevate the information contained with them quickly and automatically. So I think that's a really like concrete example of how it's been helpful. At a little bit of a higher level, there's also opportunity for folks to, again, we talked about efficiency a lot, but be able to move through deals faster. We hear from some of our customers that they actually have to leave some deals on the table because they're smaller deals, so they're not as profitable, and they either have to pass on it entirely or, they kind of just fall by the wayside.
Right.
And one of the opportunities here, particularly as we've been talking about high risk versus low risk decisions, with some of the smaller deals, there may be more opportunity to automate and rely on that junior employee as they get better and better. And so one of the things we're looking at is how can we help accelerate some of those smaller deals and actually open up new opportunities that might have been declined in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting because, a lot of times what you hear is those smaller transactions take up just as much manpower as, probably the largest transaction in their portfolio. And it's like, well, how do we balance the time spent, especially in moments where there's increased pipeline activity or side projects, implementing something. So that's really an interesting way that people can use it is to kind of speed run through some of these transactions to look for things. Okay, so jumping into kind of our magic ball, our forecasting mindset, what are some tools or innovations within AI that you see starting to creep in or flood our space? It doesn't have to be our space in general. Within the next 12 to 24 months, is there anything specifically that you think we're going to start seeing more of?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm very curious to see, and we've started to see it, but much more in, I think, the laboratory-esque setting. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about how AI has been a tool, and now it's becoming a little bit more of a collaborator, that more junior employee. Maybe it'll develop into a more senior employee. But the thing that I'm very interested to see is how the AIs themselves start to collaborate. So we've been talking about how does human and AI collaborate, but you might have one tool that is an expert in fraud detection, another tool that's an expert in financial analysis, and how can they work together to essentially be that core part of an underwriting team to share their expertise and come to, let's say, a recommendation on how to move forward. And so I don't think we've been talking about as much as like the technology working together. Now, obviously, there's some things where that can sound a little scary or dystopian, But this is where, a lot of the researchers and whatnot are spending their time to make sure that those controls are in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the ways, that we're really excited for, and I'm sure that there is something out there. A lot of it is like stepping into the unknown and exploring what's all out there. Cause I feel like there's so many different tools and groups within AI, but we work with a lot of lenders. All of our lenders work with a lot of borrowers. You receive statements or information in all these different formats. And then a lot of times, your regulator, your auditor, your lender, whoever that may be, wants it formatted this way. And that alone is something that we would be really excited on. How can these tools kind of automate that process, because that is talk about something that's time consuming and tedious, and I'm sure there's something out there, but that's an interesting way that we've looked at it as well. With all of these different ways that people are using AI, it kind of forces you to step back and evaluate your day to day and say, hey, well, where can we inject this? Like, and then also, where's our threshold that we feel comfortable with it? I think if you rewind 2 years ago, a lot of it was like, hey, let's wait and see. Let's see how other groups are using it. And now you're seeing it more and more and more. And that's why we were really excited to have you on, because it's curious, you get to see and talk with a lot of people on how they're using it. And then also it's interesting how you guys are using it as well. So kind of jumping back into, the commercial lending space, a lot of it is done the way it's always been done. What are ways that you can see lenders start implementing so they're not falling behind from a technological standpoint?
Yeah. So one of the things that we always say here is like, we're not necessarily here to tell you how to change your process or we know best. We're the vendor, our customers are the client. But we really believe in that being a real partnership, because we know software, but you know your business. And to say otherwise is just nonsensical. And so working together to really figure that out and what's best for each of our customers is super, super important. And so for some folks, that might look like we want to go full steam ahead at automation and decision making. But for other folks, that might be a little bit more of a crawl, walk, run approach. But that partnership, I think, is ultimately a big part of that process. One of the things that I would say is, like, don't be afraid to ask for help. We are the technology partner, and so we should be able to help you in that. This isn't you check a box, buy software, and then you never speak to a human again. One of the things we really talked about at IFA was the human support aspect, because you want to be able to reach out to folks and when something goes wrong, have that support and help with it. But the same goes for figuring out and forging the path forward. You don't have to do it alone, and really rely on your technology partners to help you in that.
Mm-hmm. That's great. What advice would you give to lenders that are curious about AI? They want to start trying it out. What advice would you give them?
I personally am a big advocate of, like, just get out there. The best way I learn is by doing, and so whether that's in a personal space, because you want to, like, just start to understand what level of prompt gets the right response, exploring tools in that capacity, or joining, if you have an AI committee or a technology committee within your organization, joining that and getting out there to just try out some of these tools and really play around with it. What's possible today is going to be very different of what's possible 6 months from now. And so if you're kind of just sitting back, it's a little harder to stay on top of that. So number one, I would say just get out there and try. And then I'd reinforce what I just said, which is like, rely on folks you trust to be able to help with that. You don't have to do it alone.
Right. So if I was curious, like, where would I start? That, it's would you just with sort of like an AI bot like Chat GPT, or would you kind of start looking into actual softwares that you can incorporate?
I think it depends on what problem you're really trying to
Mm-hmm.
solve. There's a framework within product world, which is to ask the question why 5 times to get at the root answer.
Right.
So if there's a problem you're trying to solve, really understand what that is, and once you're there, then think about how you might solve it. Now, so if you're just trying to explore AI, I do agree that a chat GPT. I have an Android, I'm sorry, so I am always talking to my phone and asking it questions, and that Gemini assistant is just kind of built
Right there
into my
with
life
you.
now. Yep. So big debate here, Zen. So there's really simple ways to do it. But then if you want to play around with it a bit more, there's some of these design tools. So Canva or these other things. If you're trying to do something a little more visual, you want to just play around with something that feels more tangible. There's items like that. Specific to the lending context, it is a little bit more complicated simply because unless you're kind of really that small shop of a few people and you're the decision maker, you got to make sure that you're following the rules, the procedures, because of that importance of security that we mentioned earlier. And so, I definitely encourage, go around, ask questions, see how people are using it, see what's already allowed in your organization. And if the answer is we don't know or nothing, maybe that'll prompt, a conversation and an exploration.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate being able to sit down and have a conversation with you. I know we touched on a number of topics. So for our viewers and listeners, what are some key takeaways that you would want to leave them with?
Obviously, I think the theme of today has been the human aspect of AI. And I just want to acknowledge one group that we didn't necessarily hit on, which is your customers. So one of the key advantages that folks are going to have is just having an amazing customer experience. And so I think you all would know best. If it's easy to get the information you need, get the documents you need, get through a deal really quickly, everyone's going to come out the other side of it being very happy. I think there's a trope with technology that you only notice it when it's doing something wrong. And so if you can get folks through a process where they don't even have to think that they were using technology, whether that's you have an AI support bot, they have a question, they can ask it, whether that's you have a system that can automatically say, hey, we asked for a driver's license, but this kind of looks like a bank statement. Are you sure this is right? Whether that's as simple as it's really easy to click a button and upload a document instead of digging through emails and trying to find the last 16 communications you had. I think that customer experience is really key and shouldn't be lost in the sauce of technology first.
Right. No, I love that. That's the main driver. That's a big reason why everyone is still doing what they do. Um, Thank you so much. Where can our listeners learn more about Zen and follow your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us at zenplatforms.com. To our conversation earlier, we do actually have a free version of the platform. So you can just
Okay.
sign up directly from our website, get in there, and if you're comfortable, truly start sending applications out.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome.
So would encourage that. There's a nice little chat button in the corner. I would love all of your feedback, whether it's I don't like this color or hey, do you have this feature? I will be right there happy for it. And then otherwise, we are on LinkedIn and hope to have a bunch of new content coming out from some of the amazing experts within our team.
Awesome. I will link it in the description. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this buzzword that is no longer just a buzzword with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. And to all of our viewers and listeners, thank you once again for joining us on another episode of In Focus with Haversine Funding. Remember to stay informed, stay inspired, and stay on course to growing your financial platform. Until next time.